I want to start going in with a little bit more definition, which means I'm going to go in with a slightly darker shade, which means I'm going to start using a smaller brush. Hi guys. So today I wanted to do an updated video about blending eyeshadow. I'm going to be doing it with neutrals. So if this is helpful, let me know if you want to see a more advanced version with colors. I can do that. So the first thing that's very important is eye primer. It always amazes me because I'm just so used to doing makeup, how many people who are beginners don't know about eyeshadow primer. So if you are one of those people who picked up an eyeshadow palette and you're trying to get into it and you're putting it on your naked skin and it's just disappearing throughout the day, or it won't blend, or it's just going on streaky, an eye primer is really important. Quick advanced tip, you should be wearing sunscreen during the day, so if you're wearing your eyeshadow, you may have found that your sunscreen is breaking down your eyeshadow. This is a problem that I had recently. So something that I started doing is using a much more mattified, sunscreen on my eyelids. So for my base today, I use the Aven sunscreen, Solaire, whatever. And then I used my Elta MD sunscreen on my eyelids, Elta MD UV Clear, because it's much more matte. Obviously, when you apply makeup to the rest of your face, you're gonna get like a little bit of, maybe concealer or foundation in here. So oh my God, this phone will not stop going off. So you just wanna make sure that that is all blended out before you go in with your eye primer. Now, there are multiple eye primers that you can use, sheer, full coverage. I'm going to link the ones that I like down below. I've heard good things about P. Louise. I believe that's very full coverage. Today I'm going to be using the Dominique Cosmetics Eye Base. I like this because it has a yellowy tint and the discoloration on my eyelids is a little bit more like reddish purple. So the yellow is really going to cancel that out. And I have like quite a bit of imperfections and veins that I want to cover up. If you're looking for something that's going to be sheer, the Urban Decay Original Priming Potion is fantastic. So if you don't have a lot of discoloration, you want something that's not going to be like a concealer essentially, this is really good. You can use a concealer, okay? But you want to use the smallest amount and you want to make sure that you're setting it with a translucent setting powder. Otherwise, it's gonna do kind of the same thing. Depending on like the formula of it, it might eat your eyeshadow. So I'm going to take a little bit of this. I really don't need that much. So starting on the lid and then just patting out with my finger. You could also use a brush if you really want to. And if you have a problem with eyeshadow staying on your lower lash line as well, you can definitely use an eye base on your lower lash line. You just wanna use like a smaller amount. Make sure that it's blended. So you can see the difference. It really like neutralized the color and also just, got rid of the veins on my other eye. So the next thing is going to be your brush size. It's very important to have multiple brush sizes, but the first thing that you want to do is assess your eye size, your eye shape. I have relatively large, I think I have like relatively large, decent sized eyes, and I also have a lot of, room to work with here. So I can use a brush this is my REPHR 01 brush, that's like kind of a standard, blending brush size to go in with my transition shade, which we'll get to in a second. But this is obviously going to cover like quite a bit of ground. So if you have smaller eyes than me and you're trying to cover some ground, this is my REPHR 14 brush. You can see the difference in size. It's a little bit thinner and you can get a little bit more precision. This is the kind of brush that for my eye size, I like to, build up definition in the crease. But if you have very small eyes or, smaller lid space than me, you might need something even smaller than this to create definition. So today, the palette that I'm going to be using is the e.l.f. Mad for Mattes palette. I've been loving this ever since I picked it up. It's a really good beginner palette. It has great shades, and it's also very not too pigmented, which is really good for beginners. So it's gonna take you a minute to kind of build up the pigment, but that means that there's gonna be less fallout and it's gonna be a lot easier to blend. So I'm gonna start off with my transition shade, which is going to just define my crease. So I'm gonna use this color right here. If you find that you have a palette, say it's colorful or just even if it's a neutral palette and you don't have any shade that's like a shade or two darker than your skin tone, maybe it's way too light or maybe they're way too dark, maybe the jump between them is just too drastic, you can use your contour shade. Or your bronzer, depending on how warm you want your eyeshadow look to be. So that's always a really good trick for blending. And your transition shade is essentially just like the base that you begin with. So I'm gonna pick it up with my REPHR 01 brush. This guy. I wanna focus this on the tip of the brush. I'm kind of going like back and forth like this, but focusing it on the tip. Now, the next really important trick is tapping off your brush. You wanna make sure that you are not going in with a ton of product, because if you just dip right into that eyeshadow and immediately put it down, you're just gonna get like a splotch of eyeshadow right on your eyelid, you know? So I'm tapping off my brush, which is also going to create like a nice diffused application. You wanna make sure that everything is blended out. And I'm going to start in the hollow, like the crease of my eye, which I think I've talked about, I've probably so much, like to the point where people are sick of it. But if you just kind of like poke around your eye, you can feel where the crease is, where like the natural shadow should be. So I have slightly hooded lids, which means the skin comes down a little bit. So to combat that, I like to kind of place that eyeshadow a little bit higher. So just above where my, it goes in around my eyeball. So I'm placing it just like at the bottom of my brow bone. And what that's gonna do is open up my eyes a little bit, because I'm lifting that hollow using a very light hand. I like circular motions, I like windshield wiper motions. The way that you hold your brush is gonna be really important. If you hold it down, you're gonna get more of a line at the tip of the brush. And if you hold it like this, you're gonna get a sharper edge up here, which is advice that I never follow myself. I always forget to do that. Now this is what I've started off with, right? But I wanna build that up a little bit. So I'm gonna grab that once again on that brush, and again, tapping it off. I'm just gonna kind of like build it up as much as I want. So you wanna focus it wherever you want the most pigment. I like to kind of bring it up to my brow. And then remember that like, all of this area is your eye, right? So you don't have to keep your eyeshadow just on the lid or just in the crease. You can sweep it out, which is something that I absolutely love doing, and again, most of you are probably sick of. You can also blend it all the way up to your brow bone. So any area on your eye, from the top of your lash line, from your lash line to the underside of to the lower. So any area on your eye, from your lash line all the way up to the bottom of your brow, you can put eyeshadow there. That is the world is your oyster, okay? All right, now I wanna start going in with a little bit more definition, which means I'm gonna go in with a slightly darker shade, which means I'm gonna start using a smaller brush. A really good trick is as your eyeshadows get darker, your brushes get smaller, okay? So I'm gonna go in with this color right here, which is this nice, like kind of cool toned or mid-toned brown, I guess. And I'm gonna use this REPHR brush, which is number 14, so the smaller REPHR brush. Once again, focusing it on the tip and tapping it off, okay? You can go in a few times just to really build it up and then tap it off, which is gonna create just like a much more even application. And now I'm gonna focus this a little bit tighter in the crease. Once again, windshield wiper motions. Depending on like what you're trying to define here, obviously you want to keep the darkest shades in the areas that you want to be the most defined. So the areas that you want to get pushed back in space. So making this area darker is going to make this come forward and also my lid come forward because they're much lighter. Another trick is if you feel like you need more blending, then you can go back in with that initial brush that you went in with, and you can, if you want to, you can put a little bit more product on it, like a little bit of that first eyeshadow on it, which is just going to soften that dark shade. You can also just use it without any additional product to blend around the edges, make sure that those two colors are blending, but not mixing too much. When you start applying too much product, when you start layering too much eyeshadow, that's when you get into muddy territory, okay? It doesn't matter if the colors are complementary. If you're applying way too much, you're gonna get muddy. So right now we have like a really nice soft definition. Now I'm gonna grab an even smaller brush. This is the e.l.f. Detail Crease brush. I love this brush so much. And I'm going to pick up an even darker brown. Actually, I think I'm gonna go gray. What do I want to do here? No, I'll just grab the dark brown. So I'm going to grab this dark brown right here. Once again, focusing it on the tip of the brush and tapping it off. And now I really want to build up that detail on the very outer part. So I like to add a bit of a lift to my eye, which this is like similar to a winged liner, but softer. This is going to create a little bit of that wing, that cat eye effect. And then I'm going to kind of marry it with those initial shades. Can you hear that light? It's making the weirdest noises right now. Bro, are you okay? Now, once again, the progression, right? So I can go back in with that REPHR 14 brush, which is slightly larger, to blend that shade into that medium brown. And then if I need to, I can go back in with our first brush, the REPHR 01 brush, and blend out here. Another great trick is to go in with a clean brush if you feel like it's gotten blown out way too much, or if you feel like there's an area that's like a little bit patchy and you need to kind of like do some erasing. Using a clean brush will help with that because it's not putting down any initial or additional product. All right, I'm gonna build this up some more. So I'm going in with that really dark brown, and I really want to define my eyes. So I'm going into my crease. I'm gonna go all the way around. I really want to define my lid. You definitely want to remember to build slowly. You can also do this in reverse if you really want to. You can start off with the darkest shade and then work backwards. And don't be afraid to get creative with your application. You don't have to just do windshield wiper motions or circular motions. You can do patting motions. Make sure you're using a light hand. And if you feel like your application tends to get kind of heavy, holding your brush back further is really going to help with that. Now I'm going to go back in with that medium brown. I'm literally just going to tap into it twice, tap off my brush, and then blend around those edges. Similar to how you do your upper lid and crease, you want to keep in mind like how much room you have to work with for your lower lash line. So if you're someone who has like a very small lower lash line, or you really don't like to smoke out your lower lash line, you're going to want to use like a really small brush. So for instance, I know I'm using all REPHR brushes. Maybe I can put some alternatives. This is the REPHR 03 brush, which is super tiny. It's like a really nice, super soft pencil brush. So if you have very small eyes and you need more precision, something like this would be really great. So I'm actually going to do the reverse on my lower lash line. I'm going to pick up that dark brown first, focusing it once again on the tip of the brush and really tapping it off. And I'm going to place this tight to my lower lash line, connecting it up. And I want to focus it on the outer third of my eye because I kind of want to continue that definition and that lift to the eye. Now I'm going to use my REPHR 28 brush, which looks like this. It's very dirty. It's fine. I wiped it off. And I'm going to go in with that first transition shade. And I'm going to buff underneath that. Once again, keep in mind like where you're placing your brush, how much eyeshadow is on it. Where do you want the majority of your pigment and your definition? Another really good trick for your lower lash line, because a lot of the time these kind of back and forth motions can kick product in here and you don't want that to get super dark, is patting it down first. And then once you have the majority of the pigment down, start going back in with these motions. But make sure you're not being reckless, you know? Make sure you're holding your brush back far. You're keeping the brush against the skin. You're just like going back and forth with those blending motions. All right, now obviously you have like every option for the lid, right? You can do shimmer, you can do a matte shade, you can do like something, you could do like that transition shade basically all over. It depends on how, you know, poppin' you want your eyes to be. I have kind of a glowy base going on right now, so I kind of want to like, you know, stay in those lines. So I'm actually going to grab this neutral palette from the Nudist. I'm sorry, this is the Nudist palette by LA Girl. And I'm gonna grab this really beautiful like shimmer right here. And I'm gonna use my finger to begin with. So I'm gonna pick it up on my finger. And I'm going to pat this directly in the center of the lid. But I don't wanna move my finger around too much, okay? So where I want the majority of the pigment, I'm putting it there with this kind of motion. The more you do this kind of motion, the more you're gonna be pressing it into the skin. You're gonna get like a nice reflection. Now I'm using one of my favorite brushes. This is Sigma E54 brush. I'm going to, once again, dip into that eyeshadow and I'm really tapping it off once again. And what I'm gonna do is just go into the center to begin with, and then around those edges, I'm just patting into the dark shades so that they overlap a little bit. The reason that I'm doing that is because I don't want them to look completely disconnected, but I also don't want to completely cover up that brown shadow. If I cover up, this is a very light shade. If I cover up that brown shadow with this light shimmer, it can end up looking very like gray, putting that like really light color on top of a dark color. Another thing to keep in mind is if you get transfer very easily, if like me, you have slightly hooded lids where your eye kind of comes down on top, or your skin kind of folds over here, you just want to tap that shimmer just above that line. So if you put that product there already, you don't need to worry about transfer because it's already there. And then if you feel like you need to, you can go back in with one of your smaller blending brushes and do some blending around the edges. But you do want to keep in mind that you need to be precise with this placement, because if you just go in willy-nilly and start like blending all over this stuff, that shimmer is going to go everywhere. So if that's what you're going for, that's fine. But if not, you gotta be careful, you know? All right guys, so this is the finished result with a very soft mascara application. I love these side-by-sides. I just think they're so funny, you know? Anyway, so I just wanted to do an updated blending video for beginners. And I hope this was helpful in some way. There's so many tricks, you know? So maybe we can go into more detail and talk about color, because I know a lot of you who watch my channel have a hard time with like, you know, incorporating colors without it getting muddy. So I'd be happy to do that. Just let me know if you want to see that. Yeah, that's it. Hope this was helpful. Let me know if there are any specific looks that you want help with blending. And that's it. Also colors. I love colors. So tell me what colors you want to see. I'm kind of thinking purple. I'm like really into purple right now. Like, since when? Anyway, that's it. I gotta go. Bye.